hopefully it's all getting set up. So we're now going to hear from Michael Pocock. He's a senior researcher at the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and he's interested in the interactions between people, nature and data, and especially how biological recording can be mutually beneficial for both nature and people. And he's going to talk to us today about the DECIDE project. So over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'll just wait to have a thumbs up. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. It was lovely to be able to hear Katty's talk as well. And in fact, Kat is involved with the DECIDE project. We're real privileged for her to bring her enthusiasm to what we're talking or what we're doing through the DECIDE project. So I come to you from a broom cupboard on a university just on the coast in Portugal, so hopefully it's not too dark. It's bright and sunny outside, just to make you all envious. I'm going to be talking about the DECIDE tool and the DECIDE project today. This is all about recording nature where it matters. I imagine some of you may have heard me talk about it before, but hopefully for many of you this is new. So we know that volunteer collected biodiversity data is really valuable. I mean, all of us in the room and online will know this. It's valuable for assessing the state of nature, for looking at trends, for distributions, and also actually beginning to think about the impacts of interventions. So the changes that we make and the impact that they have. We also know, and I mean, Katty demonstrated this so beautifully, that being involved in collecting data about nature benefits individuals. It benefits me in terms of my connection to nature. And in fact, we did a project a couple of years ago called Nature Up Close and Personal, which was actually testing people's engagement with nature and how that goes on to support well-being. And I'm sure that so many of you will recognise that as well. And ideally, we want these data to be useful and to support action for nature. So how are the citizen science data collected or volunteer data collected? We've got this broad spectrum from structured monitoring, things like the UK Butterfly Monitoring Scheme, and there are a few others where you revisit specific sites, follow a protocol and gather data, typically on abundance. Really, really valuable, high quality data. We've also got the unstructured data. That's the sort of thing where you can use tools like iRecord, often going out with an app. You can record what you want, when you want. We can get millions and millions of records per year via unstructured data, and that's really useful as well. You've got semi-structured in the recording, which have got elements of both. In particular, when we think about the unstructured and the semi-structured recording, though, we know that the recording is spatially uneven. And that's the case both at national scales. So we've got this little cartoon from Tom August here, where the counties are inflated relative to the number of records. I think this is butterfly record or iRecord records. And so you can see you get many more records in Southeast England, far fewer in Scotland and the Midlands of Wales. So we know that at a national scale, but this is also true at a local scale. So you can see these butterfly records here. There are certain parts of the town where you get records, other parts where you don't, large parts of the countryside where you don't get any records at all. We can talk about the reasons why that might be so, but so much of that is quite intuitive. The trouble is, or what this leads on to, is the fact that all records are valuable. So we do want to encourage people to keep on collecting records. But I would argue we don't simply need more records. We need more informative records. So the question is if that's the case and you're prepared to go out and collect data in a more informative way, how on earth do you choose where to go? Well, there are a couple of approaches, and so I want to mention two of them. So one of them, which I'll talk about first, is the targeting revisits map. And this is quite simple. What we've worked out, or what we've discovered in the in UK CEH, is when we do all of the trend analyses from the unstructured data, we actually only use data from 1 kilometre squares where there's been at least 2 records in the past, or records in 2 years. So what this means is that there's a whole load of squares where we've only got records in 1 year. If we went out again and collected records of those taxa in another year or in this coming year, then we'd be able to include both data sets or both records in the data set. So it's really valuable. And so we've set up these tools for grasshoppers, crane flies, ground beetles, and soldier flies. We're just about to launch them for this coming year, on the verge of it. But we've developed these tools, and the simple ask is, can you explore the tool and can you make the pink squares green? So go to these pink squares, which have only been visited in 1 year in the past, and visit them again. And so this is really valuable data. And so we've had good feedback from this so far, but we'd love you to go out and explore these for these taxa, see what you think. Let us know. There's a feedback form on the site. And we'd like to know if this is something that's worthwhile continuing to pursue. There's a slightly different approach which we've been adopting within the DECIDE project. And before I go on to talk about that, I will say that the DECIDE project is a project funded by the Research Council, and it's a large multidisciplinary team. So it's led by myself and Tom August, and it includes people with expertise in ecology, citizen science, statistics, social science, computer science, and so on and so on. So we've really wanted to make co-design with recorders at the heart of this project. And we've done that in a few different ways. I can talk about one of the ways in which you can get involved, and you can encourage others to get involved as I go through. So the question is then, what's this need? Well, what we know is that we've got good information on large scale trends for reporting. So the sorts of things, whether it comes from structured or unstructured data, we can get data on trends for several thousand species, which is absolutely remarkable. And those will be at a country or a UK level. We also know that if we want to think about specific sites, then we really need records for that site. So there's no excusing the fact that we need to be going out there making those records. But when we talked with data users or potential data end users, we discovered that there's a lack of comprehensive fine scale maps of natural capital. So at the 1 hectare scale, so 100 by 100 meters. And this is really important to inform regional decision-making, the sorts of decision-making which is strategic, but happens maybe at a county or a region level. When we spoke with recorders, they were saying, well, actually, I'm happy to go to different places, or I'm happy at least to consider going to different places to make records, but I need to know where on earth to go. And there aren't really useful tools for me to use to do that. And so we can see that there are some ways of doing this. And so things like looking at dot maps and raw data are really valuable. And so you can see here this map of the Smooth Newt in London. We've got a whole load of records here. The trouble is we don't know those places where we haven't got records. It goes back to those zeros, the issue of zeros, which have been visited and people have found nothing, and which have not been visited at all. And actually, even when we think about a 1 kilometre scale, that's relatively fine, but there's a lot of habitat variation within that 1 kilometre square. And so we've got a solution to this, or come up with a solution to this problem, not come up with it. We've used a solution to the problem, which is about modelling distributions. So this raises a whole question about how people transition or include modelled data as well as raw presence data within decision making, which is a big question in its own. But with the modelled distributions, what we do is we take a whole load of climate variables, habitat variables, Earth observation variables, the sorts of things, many of which we can get from satellite data, like comprehensive coverage. And we combine that with raw data on where people have gone out, biological recorders have gone out and seen a particular species. And so what we can come up with is then the predicted distribution. We can do this for many different species. There are lots of different ways of doing this. We can incrementally improve our data as we gather more records. But what we also come up with, not just is the predicted distribution, but we come up with a map of uncertainty. And so places which are more uncertainty indicate these are places where more records will be helpful to improve these models. So this is what we've done within the DECIDE project. So we've identified these priorities for recording by saying, where are the models of species distribution least confident? And we combined that across a range of different species. And then we've subtracted from that the places where observations have already been made, or at least in recent years. We combine those two together, which gives us this layer, which tells us or gives us information about where it's best to direct people to collect new observations. So we brought this together in an interactive tool. You're very welcome to go and explore it and see what it looks like. We're just, in the next few days, we're about to launch a new version of this tool. So it will have some minor changes to it. But on the tool, you can click on a location and up come the colors showing the recording priorities. Then if you click on another button, you can get pins, which give suggestions. So these are places which are accessible. We know they're accessible based on footpaths or road access, things like this, which are also in places of high recording priority. And if you click on that, then you can get a bit of information about that location, about what to expect while you're there. So we've produced this for butterflies and day-flying moths, and we're just about to include nocturnal moths as well. So as I said, there's been a lot of co-design within this side tool. We've been interviewing recorders at early stages. We've been getting people involved in focus groups. And we've also been asking for people's feedback. So please do, if you use it, you can, as many times as you want, click on the gold button in the bottom right, and you can give your feedback there. You can also join the general mailing lists, and we've got a co-design mailing list as well, which is specifically set up to give people opportunity to have more focused engagement. The general one is to keep you up to date with what's happening. So as I said, in the next week or so, we're going to be including nocturnal moths within this tool. So you can click on a button and get information about nocturnal moths. And excitingly, we're working with a bunch of recorders in Yorkshire and London using these low-cost LED traps. So we're really excited by this because so much moth recording, if you're using lights at least, is restricted to places where you can get either access to mains power or places which are really secure. So it doesn't allow us so much opportunity to go and really explore these unrecorded places. And these very portable, not so visible LED traps are, I think, a really effective way to be able to do that, obviously with landowners' permission and things like this, where that's appropriate. The second thing that we're going to be exploring this coming year is we've recognised that feedback is really important. And we know that within these online systems, that giving some feedback is valuable and really motivating to people. But we've been wondering whether we can go so much further within the Decide project. And so we're going to be running an experiment from the end of this month. And we'd love loads of people to sign up to this experiment, which is going to run over the course of the summer. And if you take part in the experiment, you'll receive a personalised newsletter at the end of each month telling you some information about the records that you've made during that month. We're going to be focusing on butterflies for this particular experiment because they're fairly well recorded. There's lots of recorders. So you can get this thing, and we're going to be exploring different ways of giving feedback. We want to try and explore which is going to be most relevant to you, what's going to be most appealing, and what's going to be most actionable, what might prompt you to go out and do a bit more recording. And to be honest, do the sort, if you're like me, have an excuse to do the sorts of things that you really love to do anyway. And so this will take records which have been submitted to iRecord and iSpot and be able to automatically generate these newsletters for you. So we're really excited by this. So if you want to find out a bit more, then do join our mailing list, and we'll be promoting it widely very soon. And the final thing is that we've got all these data, which we said we're going to be modeling those distributions for this, for decision makers to use. So we've been developing a tool for use by these decision makers. I mean, we've been developing it with them, and we've come up with a first proof of concept. So in this case, we're looking at a map of modelled butterfly richness in, what county is that? Middlesex, I think. And And this is really important then, because you may well have heard about some of these ideas about biodiversity net gain, or trying to predict where are really important sites where we ought to be focusing some recording, or even where we can actually then use remote sensed information from satellites to evaluate some of these impacts and the benefits, hopefully, that there will be on biodiversity as we adopt more sensitive management and more appropriate management for nature. So we're really excited by the way that this project is seeking to join up all the way through from the recorders through to using those records by decision makers, or using the information by decision makers. So I'll leave it there. Thank you ever so much for your attention, but I would encourage you, try out the tool, give us some feedback, and please do spread the word. We'd love to hear how people are getting on with it, and join the mailing list to find out when to join this newsletter experiment. Thank you very much.
Have we got anyone in the main room there coming to the laptop?
Yes, yeah, I'm here now. Can you see me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can.
Just takes us a little while to do things. Thanks, Michael. We all clapped, but you couldn't hear or see us, but we were clapping in the room. I'm sure everyone was clapping at home as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we're going to see how this works with questions. I think I'll sort of try and chair them from here. So even if you're remote, if you can still put them in the chat, and Martin's going to do his best to cope with both. So if we can start with one in the room, if anybody has one to start us off. A couple. Martin's just running. Well, he wasn't running, but he is now. I made him feel guilty.
I was just wondering, because I was kind of looking, a lot of it seems to be focused on stuff like butterflies and moths. So if it goes well, it might also be asking to groups like bees.
So I'll repeat that if you couldn't hear it very well. So the question was, the focus at the moment is on butterflies and moths. Is it likely to extend to groups like beetles in the future?
I think there's a lot of potential for extension. This is a project which is funded for 2.5 years. And so we've been focusing on these particular groups, in particular because there are quite a lot of recorders, and because this is experimental, we wanted to really demonstrate and evaluate how effective it was going to be. It's my vision, though, that these forms of targeted recording are a really powerful opportunity to engage people with more recording. There'll be many of us who are doing this sort of thing anyway, but there will also be a whole load of people who just don't know. And actually, we've been doing some simulations to explore in theory what happens. And it's any sort of nudging for people to go out and record in the places where we don't typically record are really, really valuable. So yeah, I think there's a whole load of species for which, or taxon, for which it would be really great to roll this out. And it could be incorporated actually within some of the online tools, even potentially down the line. You could imagine a situation that you use iRecord app or something like this, and it's actually telling you, giving you information. You've recorded a species here. Well, actually, if you go a kilometre down the road and look for those sorts of species, it's going to be really informative.
Thank you. Another question, Martin?
There's one online question,
okay,
which should be quite straightforward. I think, does the project cover Northern Ireland?
Does the project cover Northern Ireland? This was an online question.
There was a technicality with some of the remote sense data that meant that we didn't include or haven't included Northern Ireland so far. I think, I'm trying to remember what the status was with those who were doing the modelling. I think we were looking at that, yes. So it would be, yeah, obviously it would be great to include Northern Ireland as well. So sorry for missing it so far.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question. If you've got somebody, I'm sure there was another hand up in the room. Oh, it's already been covered. You've already done it. Anybody else got anything they would like to ask? Hopefully there's none in the...
There was a question similar. It was talking about bees and targeting trap nest placement. And yeah, I think exactly for these sorts of things where we're going out, and in particular, if we're out wandering in the countryside doing recording, then that's great, isn't it? That's fun. We all get a lot of enjoyment from doing that. But if you are going out specifically to put a moth trap in a location, or to put trap nests for bees, or pheromone lures for some of the moths, or various things like this, then I think the people that we've spoken to have been really keen on this idea of being informed where is going to be most useful for them to go. People are saying, look, I'm going out there for my own enjoyment, but I'm also willing to do something that really makes a difference, or as much difference as possible for the data. And so I think all of those sorts of things are actually probably even more valuable than the general wildlife recording. eDNA samples from water and things like that is another example where I think this targeted recording is going to become more and more valuable, actually.
Brilliant, thank you. So if you'd all like to join me in thanking Michael again, where he can actually hear you this time, as long as you make enough noise.